Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thursdays at 2.
Oh no. Just hearing it, Alex, already restimulates me.
Oh, God. You're not sounding as excited and infused as I was hoping you would, Doug.
I am totally enthused to be here, not on staff, dreading Thursday before 2 is all I was saying, brother.
Well, I think you need to write up everything you've done wrong against the church because you're not VGIs and you need to be feeling great about what we're
I
doing
had
here.
a massive cognition about the church recently, my friend. It's
Uh-huh.
all a lie. It wasn't me, it was the church. So I don't feel I need to do that anymore. Thanks for the offer.
Anyway, welcome everybody to Thursdays at 2. Thank you for stopping by. This week we are going to be talking about, is Scientology all bad? Doug, what do you think?
Yes, 100%. No, of course it's not. If it was, we wouldn't have stuck around for so long. You know, Alex, I have a video. This is such a great topic that we're going to talk about, and it's such a huge debate, right? There's this video that a guy named Arnie Lerma, the late Arnie Lerma, who is an ex-Scientologist, that spoke out about this. He did this thing called the 10 Steps Out of Scientology. And I have a video on it where there's different levels where when someone comes out, what's the way out of this thing? So to me, it's not, that's sort of my stable datum, as they say in Scientology, for, because there's such a debate. Well, is it all bad? If it's not, then you have the indie Scientologists and what Hubbard had, it's just this big mess, right? To me, there is an actual way out. But no, I don't think it's all bad. Of course not. In fact, we're going to talk about some of that and the residual effects that we come out with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those of you, a little bit of housekeeping before we get too far into this, we should be streaming on both Doug and my channel. So if you want to do super chats and all that sort of stuff, Doug's channel isn't monetized, so head over to my channel to do that. Apostate
Yes.
Alex. And if you leave a comment in any of the chats, we can see both chats on it from our sort of like admin panel ourselves here. Unfortunately, I have been in touch with YouTube, and they kind of wanted it to be a way that if you're watching a live stream on a channel, you can see everyone's chat. But actually, the way they've done it is that you can only see the chat from the live stream that you are watching. But us as hosts can see the live chat that everybody is posting on all the channels, so we can see all of your questions and comments. We'll bring them up on the screen and stuff as time goes on. And yeah, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff helps us grow the channels, and the algorithm pushes the video out to more people if there's a lot of engagement. So yeah, that's the sort of housekeeping out of the way. There's links in the description if you want to buy us coffees, all that sort of stuff. But is there any housekeeping you want to get out of the way, Doug?
Well, there's definitely something we need to address in the chat. Goldie says that she's just here for the bromance. I would think you wouldn't be so superficial, Goldie, and you'd be here for a little bit more than that, the topic at hand, but we'll take it.
Well, especially seeing as you dumped me live on air yesterday.
I'm just busting your balls, dude. You're so quick-witted, and you throw me, not under the bus. It's all in good humor. So I do take pop shots when you're not looking, but God damn it, apparently you have been watching. It's all in good humor, man. What's up, Mark Turry?
Hey, Mark, how's it going? What's the weather like in Clearwater Tab? That's a very good question. In Clearwater Tab, where's our weather update? Rock it out, Kim D. Hi, the bromance is amazing.
Thanks,
Look, honestly, all I can say is that it has been a really nice thing to see, this community being so supportive and helpful and nice towards each other. And in a weird way, if it wasn't for Scientology, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met half of these people.
Yes.
Goldie wouldn't be here. So, in a weird way, it's had a positive impact.
Yeah, it has. And glitter, yeah, it's not. See, Alex, I knew these are going to be memes and shit now.
These were your words, not mine, Doug. You dug yourself this hole.
Your balls, bro.
These
are funny.
Your
From
words.
romance to no-mance. Too funny, dude.
They're all your words. It's your fault.
I know. I take it back. We're good.
But anyway, so today we're going to be talking about, as we mentioned, is Scientology all bad? And I think that it's really important to differentiate that there isn't a yes or no answer to this question, right? Of course, there are good bits, and of course, there are bad bits with any faith, religion, group, coercive control group, whatever. Like any set of beliefs will have pros and cons, right? Whether it's an organized religion or not. And with particularly things like Scientology, there's got to be good bits, otherwise people would never join, right? There are always going to be bits that are good and tools that are practical and things that have helped people, because otherwise people wouldn't join. Like the introductory life improvement courses, how to live a happier life or how to communicate better. There are positives that people get from those and from the TRs and so on. And I think it's important to not blanket deny everything about Scientology, because it's quite easy to get caught up in a world where you go, Scientology's all bad and how could anyone join and blah blah blah. Actually, you need to realize that it's not all necessarily bad. There are bad bits, and the way it is used against people is not necessarily good. But if it wasn't all good, people wouldn't be a part of it.
Kind of like an abusive relationship, Alex. When you're bought into an abusive relationship, you're love bomb, and there appears this is what keeps us in there for so long too, and why there are some positive benefits. Just taking it from a relationship point of view. I won't get into details, but I'm thinking of one in particular, a gal I was dating, and there was so much positivity. But the flip side of that, because of the high control group dynamic that comes with a cult and or an abusive relationship, it can take a long time to peel apart what really was good and what really was bad. But yeah, especially initially when you're in the love bombing phase, which the cult does to everyone, you definitely feel like it's not only not all bad, you feel like it's all good. So I think that there is the main thing, brother, is the looking back at it is the residual effects, being able to be a better communicator. I didn't, not because of Scientology, but we talked about this before we went live. We learned how to pick the right words so we can communicate. I didn't necessarily get that from Scientology, but it's a good carryover. And to try to get I'm not sitting here thinking about, I have to get my attention across to Alex and I have to be tone 40 and I have to wait for him to finish before I interject. I purposely tried to speak normally and interrupt people and not wait and stop staring at them like I did. I really spent a long time trying to get rid of that natural pattern. So I'm not thinking like a Scientologist when I'm talking to you right now, but there are benefits in the way of how to communicate. And like I said, the words that I choose. And there's a lot of things like that came from Scientology that that are good residual carryovers that I don't think would have happened minus the cult. So that's some of what I got out of it. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's true. And there are elements as well that you've got to remember that because Scientology does go so deep in your brain, there are things that you do without knowing, right? It's subconsciously, and that's where the debate becomes, is whether it's harmful or not, or whether it's all bad. Because there are things that you and I both do even to this day without even being aware of it.
Yeah.
And that is therefore why you could perhaps say it's not all good, because you weren't aware that this is the sort of control it's having over you, the reprogramming or brainwashing or whatever you want to call it. Like, when you're not aware that that's what's happening to you, therefore it can be seen as manipulative. But that doesn't necessarily that they are bad things in and of themselves, right? So, for example, I tell the story about being in front of a friend who was arguing with me or who was upset or whatever, and my instinct was to shut down and stop listening to what he was saying and think, oh, I need to change this person's emotion so that I can then think about it rationally and therefore sort out the problem. When I realized I was doing that, I was like, holy cow, that's not something I realized I was doing. And ultimately that's a bad thing. So I could stop doing it, and I don't do that anymore. But there are some things, like the comm cycle, for example, communication cycle. Scientology, you teach that, one person speaks, then another person speaks, and then one person speaks, and it kind of goes back and forth like this. And, there are elements of truth to that. A conversation has to have back and forth between both people. But I even to this day find myself sometimes, not all the time, but occasionally getting a bit annoyed when people, cut my calm when they like interrupt me or don't let me finish what I'm saying or finish my sentence. And I realized in the moment, I'm like, the reason I'm getting annoyed is because in Scientology, they teach you that, you say something and someone acknowledges it and they go, good, thank you. They acknowledge what you said to show that they've listened to it and then come up with a response. And when you're out of Scientology, you realize that that's not the way conversations necessarily work. Sometimes you're sat there thinking, well, hold on, have you actually listened to what I said? Have you really? Because you haven't acknowledged it. You haven't said, okay, thank you. And it's like, well, no, people can listen and acknowledge you in ways that aren't necessarily the ways that Scientology teaches you,
It is hard to get over too, man. You just reminded me, like, the need to have that exact calm cycle. What we're talking about, guys, in case you're not familiar with it, they're very pedantic about the way to communicate,
This is so true.
including
The birds fly.
half-acts.
Thank you. The birds
Yes.
fly. Thank you. The
This is
birds
how it
fly.
all starts.
Yeah.
This is how it all starts, as Colonel points out. And that's another thing. Like, talk about the manipulation, Alex. Like, we're using the Alice in Wonderland book to grab a word from the book, make it our own, and then give it to the other person with the exact right intention. So we're really honing down an exact calm cycle. And it took forever to allow people to interrupt me, to purposely, like I said, I'd purposely try to interrupt people, not to be rude, but to break the stare. And because that thing was so drilled into me, bro, my entire life since I was a kid. That was the very first course I ever did. And then you're told that it's going to help you out with your acting and life in general. And I really believed it. So it took a long time to go into the normal world. I did feel kind of angry or sad or miss emotion about, why aren't they hearing me? Did they really get that calm? Why didn't I get an act? It took a long time to let that go and to get over that. I don't think about it at all nowadays. It's not part of my thought process. But just like the 1,000-yard stare, where I had to purposely look away from people and not pay attention to them, just to be a normal human that wasn't so focused on every little detail. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really interesting one as well, because the idea behind this stare that everyone talks about that you get in Scientology, it's because they teach you through TRs to like really have intention and to be physically present and to confront anyone and anything. So if you're talking to someone and you're looking straight in their eyes and you're delivering a message with like conviction and with confidence, then that message is going to be received a lot better than if you're kind of saying exactly the same thing but looking all over the place. And so there is something to be said about eye contact and the reason why it's done like that. You train to deliver your message with intention and with confidence, and that's a good thing. But the bad thing is, in Scientology, because you drill it so much, you do that with everything. And even if you're talking about something that's really not important, that doesn't need to be delivered with that conviction and intention, it comes across a bit creepy and a bit weird sometimes.
It does.
And it goes, I don't know if you had this, but I went kind of a bit too far the other way when I left Scientology. I realized I was doing this thing, so I deliberately had to train myself not to look everyone in the eye, and actually went a bit too far and was actually like looking all around all the time, not looking at anyone in the eye. And then people would think I was a bit shifty and a bit strange and a bit like, I'm up to no good because I'm never looking anyone in the eye. And then you have to like reel it back in and train yourself where the balance is in the middle. But you have to kind of go from one extreme to the other in order to realize where the normal level is. Did you have anything similar?
Great point. In fact, that's exactly it, Alex. In order to come, me and Marcus were talking about this the other day, in order to come, and this is kind of his way that he got out of it and what I did. It's exactly what you just said. When you're coming out of a cult like Scientology, I think it's okay to purposely swing the opposite direction and then bring it back to a medium, because otherwise it'll take you forever to get that out of your system. So I consciously went overboard I was willing to feel a little bit shifty. I had the same experience as you did by purposely looking away from people. Alex, I'd even tell my friends, look, I got out of a cult. I'm going to be a really weird friend to be around. I'm going to talk about this a lot, and you might not want to even be around me. I lost so many friends because they couldn't deal with me, and I totally understood. But I needed to fix me. I didn't know how to do it, dude. And like I said, I couldn't afford a psychologist at the time. I did go to a few that were free, so to speak, and I I did know that there was Rachel Bernstein, who was a ex-cult, person, but there wasn't too many that I knew about. And like I said, my life fell apart. I was living out of my car and shit for a while. I didn't have any money, so it was all I could do to figure out on my own. And I came up with this process where I'm just going to purposely look away from people. I know it sounds silly, but that stare makes you look like, that's what Scientologists and cult members in general are known for, and it makes you look like a creep. So my friends often didn't know what the hell why I was acting the way that I was, and they wouldn't comment on it so much as I would just give them I would tell them, if we're going to be friends, or if I met new people or old friends, I would say, look, I'm going through this transition, and I don't expect you to understand, but pardon me if I babble a lot, I'm looking away a lot, and I'm cutting your calm, just like you did right there. I mean, how is it acceptable for you to sneeze off camera, dude, when I'm clearly in the middle of communicating something? But I accept that because you're getting out of the cult and you're purposely trying to ignore me. So please, you do you, and you do your process. I'll support it.
No, I was listening. Carry on, dude. Carry on.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just in agreement. Swing one way to the other way. That's what I did. And then you swing it back to find out, well, maybe it's not all horrible, but I think you got to recognize the manipulation and the spell you were under, for lack of a better term, or you find out what happened to you through the psychology and the science of mind control. After you get that and you work on yourself, then you can perhaps come back and go, well, maybe it's not all bad. Oh, I did get this out of it. The biggest thing I got out of it, Alex, was he stole everything from everyone. And for me, undoing Scientology had to do with studying a lot of people and then some, in order to break apart the trap, how the trick worked. So that was a huge education that never would have happened minus Scientology. But clearly you don't have to be in a cult in order to go on your own study. But that was one of the residual benefits too.
I think that's one thing to note as well, that Scientology is, it takes a lot of different practical tools and techniques and practices from other religions and other groups. And there is nothing wrong with saying that you're a Scient. Like, I have no problem with someone being a Scientologist, right? If someone wants to follow that belief system, call themselves a Scientologist, that's absolutely fine. Everybody is entitled to their own belief system, right? You can believe what you want, and I have no issue with that. I used to be a Scientologist, right? You're entitled to believe whatever you want. That's absolutely fine. The thing that I do start to have a problem with is when it is then being used and has a negative impact on people. And I don't believe that Scientology has a negative impact on every single person all the time in the extreme ways of abuse and trafficking and all this sort of stuff that we hear about. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but the majority of people's experiences in Scientology are generally positive, right? People who are paying to go up the bridge,
It depends.
generally they think they're having a good experience. They think they're having a great time.
For sure.
That doesn't mean they're being locked up in rooms like I was, or forced to join the Sea Org, or disconnect from their families. Like, that does happen, but that's not the general experience of most people in Scientology. But that doesn't mean that the manipulation, the coercion, the negative side of things isn't happening, right? One of the things I talk about, like with this idea I mentioned earlier of a friend who is upset, and we were having a conversation. I was trying to manipulate his emotions, but I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing until it hit me. And then I was like, holy smokes, I left Scientology 6 years before this event. I was like, I left 6 years ago, and yet I'm still sat here doing something that is a Scientology technique. And that's when I realized that even though I wasn't believing or following Scientology, I was still doing something that was ingrained into my brain that was a Scientology technique, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the harm is, that people who genuinely and generally are having a good experience and a good time in Scientology, they don't actually realize the effect it is really having on them behind the scenes.
100%. That's why, we were just talking about this too, Alex, before going live. There's been people that have reached out to you, and I think a couple on me. I'd have to go back to my notes or whatever, but they get out. They're out for 20 or 30 years. They recognize maybe something happened to them, and then they move on with their life. But they often don't know what they don't know, because it goes really deeply into your subconscious. It becomes a way of being. We're to sear this tech into every fucking ounce of our body. And that's the mentality. That's actually kind of what he says on some of these policies. Especially this is what I grew up with, dude. This is my metaphysics. This is what I resisted it, but my whole idea was that my dad must know what he's talking about. He's an OT. He could read my fucking mind. I can't withhold anything in the family, even though I don't like Scientology. So the whole environment, I thought that was normal, bro. So when I came out of it, it was such a shock to realize, well, my dad had to fall from his pedestal. He was no longer a god. Not only that, how could you do this to me, dad and mom? Hubbard, I trusted him. I was learning how to communicate. I was no doubt in my mind when I was under this spell at all. It's a freaking miracle that I got out. So the whole, dude, Alex, 15 years later, I'm still working this out and doing the channel and talking to you and some other exes. It's all really healing. And Lady Pamela says exactly how I feel. And I know what she means to get this point across. She says, I still have troubles with friends, Doug. And my crap was 30 years ago. Yeah, I understand. And they think my interest in this still is negative for me, but I know it isn't. And they just don't get it. I have had that conversation. I've had to say that to my friends so many times. This is what I meant, lady, when I was like telling my friends, look, I'm going to be a little bit weird to be around. I'm going through something that you might not understand. I was in a cult, called Scientology. As soon as I would say that to them, by the way, Alex, their ears would immediately perk up. Because it's not like they were interested in Scientology almost uniformly, but they didn't understand it. So once they got interested, they would let me tell them about it, but they didn't give a crap about the trauma or anything. They just found that the subject interesting, but it got to a point where, just like Lady says, I would talk about it so much I needed to. And all they would tell me is, dude, get over it. It's not healthy. Stop fucking talking about it. And they just didn't understand at all that I needed to. And I wasn't being negative by continuing to talk about it and become obsessive about it and keep my little diaries about what's Hubbard's thought and what's mine. Every day I was having new perceptions come in just by talking with people. It was an experience. And they had no idea while they were caring about their everyday lives, just what was going on in my head. And I couldn't get a single person to duplicate that, as they say in the cult. And it sucked, bro, because I just needed someone like in Scientology to acknowledge me, even if they didn't understand it. But they often felt the need to, not experiencing it themselves, to put their opinions on me and tell me what I needed to do, that I needed to stop talking about it, that here's what you need to do, Doug. It's like, motherfucker, have you ever been in an abusive relationship like this? Do you know what you're talking about? And so it would sling arrows into me just by opening up, because then they felt they could give me their opinion when they hadn't experienced anything like it. It was really fucking frustrating. I feel you on that big time, Lady Pamela. That's the hardest part.
Goldie's comment here, Days Confused. At least, when you talk about it here, your audience is voluntary, and here because we're interested and care. That's so true.
Can I say something on that real quick that Goldie points out? That's the major reason why this has been such an amazing experience, because I couldn't get somebody necessarily to sit there and, I have to kind of corner them to listen. Here, the most amazing thing is people want to listen and they actually do give a shit. That alone, brother, because I couldn't get anybody to fucking listen. The fact that anybody cared at all, let alone this community really cares, and there's people that will listen, you guys have no idea how much that alone has helped healing all of us, probably to some degree.
Absolutely. I think one thing to note is Scientology is different from other belief systems, right? Because it's not like you're ever given a book in Scientology like the Bible, and you're told this is the story of Jesus. You either believe it or you don't believe it. Scientology is all about techniques, principles, things that you can apply and do in your life. And so you feel very much like you're in control, and it's things that you're doing rather than things you're necessarily believing in. But because of that, it breaks down some really core fundamental systems and ways of thinking in your brain. So one thing we talked about before going live was the communication, right? The communication course. We were talking earlier about the person A speaks, then person B speaks, and that idea of emotional manipulation. But I think it is, when you look at how much Scientology drills into your brain their way of thinking, it does become a lot harder to let go of or to move on from, right? But that doesn't mean that it's all bad. So an example I wanted to bring up was the side effect of the communication course, right? So negatives, obviously, you know, when you're communicating with people, you do it in the Scientology way. You feel like you are manipulating people because you are trying to change their emotional tone scale. You have the crazy eye stare thing. Those are all things that happen because of Scientology, but that doesn't mean it's all bad, right? One thing we talked about before going live was the idea of thinking a lot about what we're saying and the intention behind our words, right? Which is not necessarily something that Scientology teaches as a benefit of the communication course, but it's almost like a side effect that we still do to this day. And that's not a bad thing, but we do it as a result of our analyzing what a communication actually is. Because if you think about it, people don't normally break down what communication is, right? You don't learn in school how to communicate because you know how to communicate. Everyone needs to. You don't need to be trained in it. But because you don't break it down in your head and think about, okay, what actually is a communication? Even though you don't have to believe and agree with Scientology's way of breaking it down, if it is composed of affinity, reality, communication, all this sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Separate to that, just the fact that you in your head have broken it down means you've thought about it in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have, and
Yeah,
therefore
well said.
you're going to be more effective at it, even if you're not actually applying anything you've learned in Scientology. You have spent time and attention on it. So for example, with communication, the idea of what our words mean and the intention, Doug and I are really good, and pretty much any former Scientologist I've spoken to, really good at getting the point across that they want to get across, right? Not necessarily in as few words as possible, but if someone wants to get a message across to you, they will know how to say it and what to say to get exactly the point across that they want to get across. It's not going to be misunderstood or misinterpreted, because in Scientology you break down what these words mean and learn how to deliver the message you want to. And that's a positive thing. That's not necessarily us applying a Scientology technique. And it's certainly not something that is sold as a benefit of why you need to do the comm course, but it
Right.
is a hang up of Scientology. And that's what I mean with it. Is Scientology all bad? Well, no, not necessarily, because we wouldn't necessarily be as effective in getting our message across if it hadn't have been for breaking down communication, if that makes any sense.
I can't disagree with that. And you just reminded me of like one of the things that made that trap so clever is you're right. Where have you ever heard the communication formula or communication in general broken down? Where have you ever been told to look up a word that you don't understand? And that's the reason why you gave up a study. I mean, that made so much sense to me. He undercut everything where things that you just take for granted in regular life, he took the time. This is why I thought he was brilliant, to break down the formula, to break down why people give up a study because they don't understand the words. This is why even all these years later, I'm still tripping out. Like, how could he possibly ping on some concepts that possibly could have been used for good, but were ensnarement things and get you thinking like a computer and focusing way too much on actually kind of irrelevant things. But at the same time, it seemed like he was onto something. What do you think about that? You know, like, do you think that, Scientology, if you took out all the traps and all the elements of it, do you think you could still be left with Scientology? Because there's this big debate. I already know the answer to this question, but I'm throwing this out there because it's something that comes up a lot. I've heard people say, if you just take away all the bad bits, what's wrong with the COM formula? What's wrong with looking up your words? What's wrong with the
Yeah.
ARC triangle? So do you think you could ever have Scientology minus the bad stuff?
Yeah, I think it's hard, and it's such a big topic, isn't it? Because Scientology is so much. It's not like with Christianity, just as an example, you know, you kind of think, well, can you be a Christian without believing in Jesus? Well, if you think about it, probably, yeah, because you can probably still live your life according to the Ten Commandments and, you
Right.
know, the idea of helping people. You know, there's things you can take away that still leaves you with a practice, a way of living life that, you know, is beneficial to people. With Scientology, it's so hard because it's all encompassing, and there's so much that was taken from other people, other belief systems, other philosophers and scientists and so on. Like, L. Ron Hubbard claims to be the sole author of everything, but
Yeah.
actually what he did do is take bits from lots of different practices. I think one of the things that makes Scientology so effective is the conviction with which it's delivered, right? Scientology works and it is appealing because you say that it is the only way, right? Scientology will work 100% of the time if it is applied correctly 100% of the time, right? In KSW, you talk about applying Scientology correctly, it is the only way. And I think that so much of what makes Scientology work and what makes it appealing is that it's knocking out of the park any wrong applications or any doubt that it won't work, right? And because of that, it gives you confidence. I think that confidence is a real big part of what makes Scientology work, because what
Definitely.
makes it work. Because when you knock out of the park any other potential way of living life or doing things or whatever, it makes you think, cool, well, I'm not, I don't need to doubt now. Like, I know this is going to work, so therefore it's going to work. And because you have faith in it, you have the confidence that it's going to work. It's almost like a placebo effect. It probably will work, right?
Exactly. That's a great point. That was one of the things that struck me with Scientology, especially with KSW, which stands for Keeping Scientology Working, which once you get to the major courses, that's the first thing that you read. And it's just this really overconfident thing about we've discovered the technology. We need to hammer out of existence any incorrect application because it's all sussed. You know what it is, Alex? Scientology has an exact roadmap and promises that life is like a formula. It's like a math equation that if you simply do A, you'll always get B. But you know what I found out afterwards? Not only is not life not a computer formula to follow, and there's an exact right way and a one for one, you'll get up the bridge. And, it doesn't matter your intelligence level or any other factor. If you just do these steps, you're guaranteed by the time you get up to OT8 to be at cause over life. Utter horseshit. Life is not a formula, dude. I found out since then. And not only that, it took away a lot of the joy and it took away a lot of it was super painful getting out of Scientology. I cried every night for years, but you know what? That felt fucking real and it felt good. And Scientology in juxtaposition against that was fake. And there isn't, I wasn't looking for a formula. I let myself go overboard. I didn't become a, crack whore and sleep with hookers and shit and doing 8 balls every night. I didn't go bonkers in that way, but just allowing myself to smoke a joint, dude, when in Scientology, my whole life that was evil. Allowing myself to sit and watch television, even though I know I need to be producing and working, even today, I still have a hard time focusing on just watching a freaking movie because I always feel like I got to be doing shit. But, do you want to
See,
jump in, please?
yeah, I was just going to say that's one of those really good examples of whether it's all bad. I mean, I have the same thing, right? In Scientology, you're taught that being productive is where you find value, right?
Yes.
If you're not being productive, you're not valuable. And
Production
that's
equals morale.
so therefore, if you're being productive, you're going to be happier, you're trying to achieve something, other people will value you, you're doing something good. And so therefore, when you're not being productive, you feel guilty because you feel like you're not producing, you're not adding anything to the planet, to the world, to humanity. And that's one of those big hang-ups that like nowadays is for me and you both, like it's a harder thing to like be okay with just sitting there watching a film or playing a game or like not doing anything that is productive. That's a really hard thing to get over in your recovery process, like learning to be okay with just lazing around and being a bum for a little bit because it's so drilled into you. So that's a negative thing. But there is a positive side of that in the, I don't know if you're the same, but for me, when I'm in like work mode, when I'm doing something that's work related, I am 100% focused on it. I'm committed and I will work hard. I'm a hard worker. Every former Scientology staff member or SEAL member is going to be a hard worker because it's so drilled into you that you work hard. And so that's a positive thing, right? It's a negative thing in that it takes it to the extreme and it's really hard to find comfort and being okay when you're not being productive. But in those moments where it is important to work hard, in your day job, when you're trying to earn money, when you need to focus on something, right? It's a good thing because you're actually going to be more focused and more committed perhaps than someone who hasn't been in Scientology. So that's what I mean about, is it all bad? Well, there are bad bits. And of course, sometimes the bad outweighs the good. but let's not forget that there are actually good bits in there as well, you know?
And let's not come across like we're minimizing the suffering from people that, that,
Yeah.
I mean, I lost my fucking family. So I'm not, we're not encouraging anybody to go join Scientology, obviously. Just wanted to put in a caveat there. But Goldie says here, like in reference to that, Alex, I feel like you lose the spontaneity in life with hardcore Scientology. Is that about right? Yeah. For me, Goldie, it was conflicting my acting, which was, I was being taught by my teacher that it was an intuitive thing. We're not acting or trying to fake shit. It was literally about feeling things in the moment. So that was conflicting more and more just by being an actor and having the right teachers with my Scientology programming. But at the same time, that kind of left brain linear thinking that Scientology pounded into me, I think that's a good thing too. But it certainly removes the spontaneity. So what I came out with on the other side is letting myself go. Alex, I just came back to square one. It's like even in the society and going through the schooling system, I wasn't down with any of that. It felt like I was kind of going through a version of Scientology, but this is what you do in life. This is what my parents pushed on me. And Scientology has just exacerbated that, or however you say that stupid word. I'm not going to word clear it, so don't make me. It just, when I finally let go of Scientology, I really let myself go with my intuition. That was the only guiding force I had because my mind was so fucked up. I literally couldn't use that to get out of the situation. So by letting go and letting God, so to speak, following my own heart, and then also that left brain being very linear about things that I got from Scientology, I think that was really important too, both at the same time, firing on all cylinders. That was a carryover about how to communicate, how to get the words across properly. It doesn't matter what you say on YouTube or how well you say it. People have feelings, myself included, and you're never going to be able to communicate exactly what you want. Someone will always misinterpret it anyway. So I kind of gave up even on that. But I'm just saying, yeah, like coming out of Scientology, I got the spontaneity back, which is what I had anyways. It was beaten out of me through the schooling, my parents, and especially Scientology. But also it gave me a logical, linear, maybe super, I don't know, left brain way of thinking, which I think can be beneficial. You can't just totally float out into the ether and do whatever you want, both brains firing at the same time.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example. Escaping the Cultiverse A, who is Gabriel Toth. If you haven't seen her already, I did a really
It's a
great
great interview.
with her.
Gabriel, that
Thank
was
you.
awesome. Yeah.
She's the former executive director of the Vancouver Church of Scientology. She left and spoke to me. I did an interview. It's called Breaking Free, the untold story of Scientology Canada. Go and check it out if you haven't already, and definitely go and subscribe to her channel. She's just joined SPTV. She's going to be making lots of content about her experience being at the very top of Scientology in Canada. So go and follow her, Escaping the Cultiverse A. But the reason I bring her comment up is because it's interesting, right? What I want to make really clear here is we are not, and I am certainly not sitting here defending Scientology and saying it's all good or you should go and join or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that as part of the recovery process, it is very easy to just throw the toys out of the pram and say Scientology is all bad, right? But actually, what I found is that didn't help me recover because I didn't then confront actually what Scientology was doing to me and the effect it was still having on me. And I think it's much harder and much more mature to look at exactly what the effect Scientology is having on you and accepting that it's not all bad. There are good bits in there. So what I want to make crystal clear is I'm not saying that Scientology has a net good impact. I'm not saying Scientology is good. I'm just saying that by acknowledging and accepting in your head the good bits, it then makes it easier for you to kind of sort it out in your head and therefore recover from it better. So what Gabriel said here, the body of Scientology is engineered to control you and indoctrinate yourself into following the rules and becoming a robot. It is so true. Like if you look at Scientology in itself, it's programmed to make you follow a certain way of living, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of belief, and it makes you squash emotions and so on. That is the impact it has, and I'm not denying that. But it is really hard once you've been in Scientology for a period of time to differentiate in your head what is something that you believe because of you, and that's something that you've decided, or is it something Scientology has made you believe or implanted in your head? Because Scientology makes you feel like you're the one making the decisions, you're the one doing the work, you're empowering yourself, you're reading this, you're applying it, you're seeing it work, right? No one sat there telling you this is what you need to believe in, or this is what you should do. And because of that, in your head when you leave, it's a mind fuck of, hold on, did I
Absolutely.
actually believe that, or is that something Scientology has made me believe? And part of that recovery process is looking at, okay, well, what are the good bits and what are the bad bits, and from that you can then start to recover. But if you don't look at that good and bad side of things, you're not ever, it's going to be harder to recover, because you're just going to be, oh, Scientology's all bad. Okay, well, what? So
Good
does that
point.
mean that you're going to live life without any work ethic and be a lazy bum? No, you're going to have a work ethic and you're going to work hard when you need to. That's a positive thing. And actually, by looking at the positives in that way, you become more empowered, because you're the one in control and deciding how far to take that. Whereas in Scientology, everything is to the extreme and you have no
Yeah.
control of how it affects your life.
Which is another reason why you can't really take out, the good bits of Scientology and still have Scientology, because as you just pointed out, it's black and white thinking. The only reason someone gives up a study is because they've gone past a word they understand. The only reason someone gets sick, is because they're connected to a suppressive person. Everything is black and white. So if you remove, and just keep the good bits, like the indie Scientologists say, you wouldn't have freaking Scientology anymore. You just wouldn't,
Yeah.
because it's one of the things that makes it destructive, a high control group, is because it's my way or the highway. There's only one way. And as we were talking about earlier, life is not a formula. It would be nice if it was a computer program and you had an exact right way so you can avoid all the pain in life. Alex, so much of my cult experience is running away from reality, looking back at it. Now, we were manipulated into that, and you make a great point. We're doing it to ourselves. Nobody's holding a gun over our head. I asked that narcissistic psychopath that question based on what you had brought up about that when we were talking. And he was explaining, I was like, how do you get somebody to make them think it's their own idea? And that is the way to manipulate somebody the most, because it really felt like in Scientology, like you said, nobody's making us do a damn thing. We're coming to these ideas on our own.
Mm.
That's why it's important, like you said, to understand what happened to you from a scientific and psychology study about hypnotism, about mind control, about how do you get somebody to make, to think it's their own idea, about narcissists, sociopaths, all that stuff, so
Yeah.
that you can then be, as they would say in Scientology, at cause again over your experience, rather than, like you said, walking and drifting away like some of these other people, where they don't even know what they
Yeah.
don't know, and they might still be carrying that shit over 20 years later.
Yeah, I think a lot of also what to consider here is what are the good bits in Scientology. You have to differentiate exactly from my experience, what I've looked at, from the sort of takeaway that I've come up with in my head, and other people may think differently. But for me, the good bits in Scientology, or the good bits you can take away from it, generally are not actually policies or beliefs or techniques of Scientology that are good. It's the side effect of that which is the good bit. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
just to give some clarity, right, the idea of any faith, Christian, Islam, Jew, Scientologist, whatever, right? Someone who is living life according to a religious way of living, they're going to find some benefit in that. They believe that there's a higher power, there's a reason to live life, they have a reason to try and live life in a better way and be kind to other people and so on. It With Scientology, it's like that's the benefit, right? It almost doesn't matter what the teaching or principle of Scientology is. The benefit is, for whatever reason, the people who are following Scientology are trying to live a better life. They're trying to help people. They have found purpose and meaning and cause in life. Whether or not that's a good thing, or you believe in it or agree with it, it almost is irrelevant in the context of what I'm trying to say here. What the good bit about Scientology isn't the belief itself, it's the impact that has on you.
Hmm.
Because when you are following this belief and you're trying to live a better life and so on, you're more confident and you're happier, you're trying to help people. So that's the good bit, is that you found a purpose, right? So
Right.
the good bit
Placebo
isn't
effect, though, right?
necessarily, yeah,
Yeah.
it's the side effect. Like the communication thing, right, that we were talking about earlier. The principle of how you communicate and the comm cycle and ARC triangle and all of this in Scientology isn't the good bit. The good bit is a side effect, which is you think about how you're communicating and you
I
think
see.
about how to deliver the message you want to deliver. The method, the Scientology belief, isn't necessarily correct, right, or good, but the fact that you are actually thinking about it is the good bit, because people don't think about it in that way. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm trying to get across here, is it's not necessarily, it almost doesn't
I
matter
hear you.
what the belief is, it's actually the side effect of the belief that is the positive thing, right? If Scientology has left you in a place where you feel like you have to be productive and work hard, well, yeah, when you take it on the Scientology front to the extreme, that's a negative thing, because you and I both have problems relaxing and being
Mhm.
lazy and all of this. So yes, it's a negative thing. But when you have managed to get over it and you kind of get to terms with it in your head and you've done that recovery work, well, actually you're the one that's empowered, because you're aware of it and you can use that to your advantage and be focused and work hard when you are wanting to be productive.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the principle itself is negative because it makes you feel guilty and not happy when you're not being productive. But the idea that you should focus on what you're doing and you should try and work hard in whatever you're doing and focus on whether it's being creative or whether it's working in a job or whatever it is, being efficient and so on. Um, do you get what I mean? Like it's the
I
side
do.
effect
Of
that's the
course I
good bit.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, escaping the cultiverse. That's a great name, by the way. I completely understand what you're saying, Alex. I wouldn't have stayed in for 26 years if it was all bad. My friends and family were Scientology, and I had Scientology clients as well. It encompasses your life. Exactly. That's the thing. I don't, I, it was such a big part of my life. I don't really know what life is like without that. So, someone also earlier was asking, about have you do you guys ever get to move on from it, or do you more like integrate it? To me, it's not getting, at first I was trying to delete it, but then it became integration. I can't undo it. It's kind of stupid to do that in my opinion anyways, because it was just making me fight. Like, I'd rather understand what happened rather than fight it, or just like, because then you become, I was really angry, Alex. I did, a few protests where I would project my anger onto the poor people that were stuck in the same trap I was. So that's another thing. It humbled the shit out of me. It taught me how someone can fall for this. So I can never look at another person with another belief system that seems silly to other people and go, what an idiot. So on a very deep level, it taught me how I believe anybody can be led down a primrose path that turns into, Satan without knowing it, simply by the techniques that have been around since ancient history, how to manipulate the mind or whatever. So that study of like learning how that can happen humbled the shit out of me. So it absolutely destroyed my ego. Not that you don't need one, you need a bit of an ego, right? To, assert yourself. I'm not like all, timid at all. I'm not talking about that. Just talking about the ego death that people talk about sometimes when they go through like spiritual enlightenment. Because brother, it crushed me, man. I thought I knew everything. I was so cocky and arrogant because I knew I had a special way to communicate. I knew that I knew more than my mates around me. And I knew they all had reactive minds that they hadn't gotten rid of. So everything, it was just, when I looked at my life, at everything through that filter, I was absolutely certain that was the way to see reality. So since then, a million other viewpoints have entered my head, and it humbled me to think, wow, I was so certain to a terrifying degree, and look at how wrong I really was. Now
Mm.
that really smashed
I
me.
think this is something that I've just thought of. Well, that's made me think about it, right?
Mhm.
The thing that I have a hard time with is people who have the viewpoint of like Scientology is all bad, and everything about it is you need to be completely anti-Scientology. How can you possibly say any of it was good or whatever?
Right.
I think actually no, that is a Scientologist way of thinking,
I
right?
agree.
Because in Scientology it's binary, right? In Scientology it's
Exactly.
everything is this is the way forward, and Scientology is the way
Great
to clear
point.
the planet, and so on, and there's no other way. Well, if you look at it in the opposite, right, and you're saying Scientology is bad and there's no other way, you have to fully disagree with everything about Scientology. Well,
Right.
that's just as destructive in terms of the way of thinking, because it's
Good
also
point.
binary, right? The thing that you need to do when leaving Scientology is be okay with this nuance, this gray area, right? What you can't do in Scientology is research things for yourself outside of Scientology and make up your own mind and
Exactly.
decide intelligently what you think about something, because you're only allowed to look at Scientology techniques and principles. And so actually it's more empowering, it's more intelligent, and it's generally better to have the power and look at it subjectively and make your own mind up. And it's okay to say, yeah, there are some bits that benefited me, that helped me. Because I saw this comment a second ago, actually. Where is it? Here. Downton Abbey. If you say it was all bad, you'd be trying to
Yeah, that's the
forget
one I was trying to
huge
go.
chunks of your life that seems impossible and incredibly sad, right?
Yeah.
When I was on staff, I had a great time. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
I
locked in
did
a
too.
room and wasn't allowed to leave until I confessed what I did wrong against the church. There were abuses and things that happened that weren't good. But because of that, that doesn't mean I should, or I'm going to put it all in one basket and say it was all bad, because actually there were some good bits. There were some good times I had. I had great times with great friends. And, actually, I think you need to give those good moments value, because if you don't, you're just sticking your head in the sand and you're just thinking binary again, just like you were in Scientology. So actually, you need to have that power in you to kind of look at things subjectively and accept that some things were good and a lot of things were bad. And by doing that, that doesn't mean you agree with Scientology. That doesn't mean you are promoting Scientology or think people should join or stay. Actually, you're saying in your head, yes, there were good bits, but ultimately it had a negative impact, or whatever your own decision is. You're making your own mind up about it, which you can't do when you're in Scientology, because in Scientology, it's all good, or you're not on the or it's not, right?
That's what makes it a destructive cult, and that's why there was no rationalizing with my pops when I'm like, Dad, we're in a dangerous situation. I'm scared. I've got the cult now is mad at me. I'm not trying to be an SP. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just you got to look at the subtlety of what we're involved in. I know, Alex, I had so many conversations with them and so many emails back and forth and so many attempts, but once that black and white thinking that this is the only way, once that mentality, it's a huge red flag, by the way, guys. I mean, obviously I know that now, and I'm sure you guys do too, but I didn't know it at the time. Now, as soon as someone says to me, I want to tell you about Jesus, is the only way, and the only way you're going to go, I'm just like, not interested.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, it's like that certainty, which both seems to be a placebo effect and build you up, was what was making it impossible for me to talk any sense into my parents and even myself, because no one was going to talk me out of it, because I knew. It's
Mhm.
actually terrifying, brother, at how effective that spell is and how it sometimes requires a miracle to be out.
Mhm.
Like the gal who started up the Cultivert channel. What is her
Escaping
name?
the cultiverse, eh? Yeah, Gabriel.
Gabriel.
Like,
Yeah, she's lovely, man. And it's like
oh yeah,
she could easily have been in that for the rest of her life. Like
yeah.
I'm just love it when people get out, because I know what they're going through, and we all have to peel this amazing thing out. To my outsider friends, it looked like I was being too significant, spending too much time breaking down
Mm,
Scientology, etc. It was what I did full time. But Gabriel and other people will understand, just we might look ridiculous to our friends because they go, of course it's all bullshit. Why are you still thinking about this? They don't see how we were let in slowly. So the way out is to come out slowly, step by
mm,
step by step.
mm.
I do think there is a
Absolutely.
bridge to total unprogramming, because there's how they say the way out is the way through. Well,
Yeah.
you walk into Scientology, and the deeper you go in, the more programmed you are. But I think there is a way to walk out of that too, and
Mm.
to integrate it, not delete it, because it was a part
Yeah.
of our life, and
And the
take
way
from
of
it what
doing
you
that,
get out of it.
yeah, the
Yeah,
way of doing that isn't just to put it all in a box and say it was all bad,
exactly.
because it's not all bad. Like, it is, Scientology is based on, L. Ron Hubbard took lots of different practices, different bits from different belief systems and practices, and put them in to get together into his own thing that is repackaged as Scientology. But when you actually dissect it and look at where he got all his ideas from, a lot of the ideas that he bastardized, right, that he changed and manipulated into his own thing, a lot of the original concepts and stuff are not all bad, right? If you
Oh, I
think about
totally
the
agree with
idea
that.
of counseling, talking to someone else about your problems,
Yeah, great
that
point.
is a good thing. And
Yep.
that is ultimately what Scientology auditing is kind of meant to be. It's where the
It's
idea came
mimicking it.
from. He's manipulated it and changed it into something else. But the idea behind it is a good thing. Talking to people
Yes.
about how you feel about things, right? That's only a good thing. And that's what I mean is, by throwing it all into one basket and saying it's all bad, well, actually, you're denying yourself the ability to recover from it, because you have to accept that where it comes from actually might be a good thing. Escaping
Great
the
point.
controversy, Gabriel here, I completely understand what you're saying, Alex. I wouldn't have stayed in for 26 years if it was all bad. My friends and family were Scientologists, and I had Scientology clients as well. It encompasses your life. And that's the thing, right? Where it's not looking at it all being good or bad. Ultimately, it has a negative impact because it is this coercive environment. When your life is so fully um, encompassed by something like Scientology, that makes it harder for you to decide when you want to leave or take a step out or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't do that because
Yeah.
everyone there is thinking Scientology is the way to clear the planet, it's the only
Yeah.
way of doing it. And so when you start thinking, maybe I want to do something else with your life, then you're kind of
Dilettante.
trapped. And
Yeah.
that is therefore the negative impact of Scientology, right?
Definitely, because it's all or nothing, and it starts with that KSW, one of the very first policies. This is a
Yeah.
deadly serious activity. If we don't get out of the fucking trap now, we'll never have another chance. It's that kind of black and white thinking. And again, if you remove that, you don't have Scientology. And you also don't have the fervor and the placebo effect and everything else that would come along with that.
Exactly. Escaping the controversy again, Gabriel, is molded us into what we are today. I totally get the anger. I wanted to sue them.
Yeah, me
And
too,
that's the thing.
Gabriel.
Like, everyone goes through those stages in recovery of being angry, of being
Yeah, and it's
sad, of
totally
being
okay.
upset.
You should go through that.
Yeah,
Absolutely, I think. You need to get angry.
because those are all emotions that you're not allowed to have in Scientology.
Exactly. I allowed myself, Alex, if I didn't have my acting class to act out that, because I knew it was happening, I would have
Mm,
killed myself when my parents are blowing up their building. I really wanted to do that, dude. When it came down to actually suiciding myself, I found out it's kind of scary. So I couldn't kind of pot commit to it. But I didn't see the way out, man. And I was filled with so much anger, but I allowed myself to feel that. And it's okay. I think you have to allow yourself to go through the emotions. And what isn't there that grieving process where first you're
mm,
this, then you're that, then whatever. I had a place to act out my emotions. I knew consciously what was happening, so I let it fly, dude. I even let it fly with my friends, and I would give them the caveat where I'm going to be triggered by a lot of things you say and just in general. So I'm going to be mad or I might act weird, but I'll come back to you in 10 minutes or tomorrow and apologize. But I'm going to let myself fucking feel shit and act out. And
mm,
it might be unpleasant to be around. I would literally tell my friends that because I knew it was happening. I knew they suppressed my emotions and made me into a secondary sociopath. And the only way out was to feel that. And like I said, Alex, I was crying every fucking day for years, but it felt great. And I
mm,
also know that I needed to feel that. And it was just like amazing how much suppressed emotion was in there.
mm,
And it's just like, that's what almost killed me. The emotional content that was suppressed that then
mm.
exploded.
Yeah.
And once I realized I was conned. Yeah.
I'm exactly the same. Like, even to this day, in the last 3 months, I've probably had more escape nightmares and dreams and like
Wow.
insomnia and horrible night's sleep than I have in many, many years. Because going through this process of recovery and talking about it and going through my experiences, right, it does stir it all up. And
Definitely.
ultimately, it's a good thing, and it's good because I'm processing now in my head, in my brain, in my dreams, what I went through. And it's, it has the effect that it has. But if you don't confront it, I suppose, then you're
Right.
not gonna ever, I put it away in a little box in my mind and kind of moved on with my life and didn't really think about Scientology for a long
A
time.
lot of people do
But that
that.
meant I didn't process it. And
Mm,
now I've started processing it. I've got my channel, I'm talking about it publicly and
good for
interviewing
you.
people. I'm processing, which is a really tough, hard thing to
I
do, right?
understand, brother.
But
I
I'm
understand.
glad I'm doing it because it means that
Me
I'm
too.
now figuring out in my brain what actually I went through and what I did. Kellycopter just said all cults have to have some helpful info in order to get people in. My parents found it very helpful. I can't help but think it sucks though. That's exactly the point, Kelly. What we're saying here is not
That's
that
how I
it's a good thing or that it's had an overall net positive impact or people should
it
join
definitely has
or it's
not.
a good thing. I personally believe Scientology has a overall net bad impact than it does a net good
No
impact.
doubt.
But that doesn't mean that people aren't looking at it when they're in as a positive thing. Your parents, right? Obviously, they were horrible people and they did horrible things to you. There's no denying that. But they thought they were doing the right thing, right? Something has empowered them, right, and made them believe that they're doing something good for the planet, they're doing the right thing, and that in itself is a good thing. I think
Yeah.
the bad thing is that what they made your parents believe and do is negative, right? It's like if you were to encourage someone to murder someone, right? Ultimately, that's not a good thing. But the fact that you've given that person purpose or meaning when they weren't going to, is potentially good. It's about dissecting it, right? Scientology makes people do bad things, which is a bad thing. But the fact that it does ignite that kind of drive
Yeah.
in some people is a good thing. And I think the thing that is upsetting or bad or whatever is that it ignites people to do the wrong things. And actually, if it could ignite people in a positive way, then it would have a much better impact on the world. Does that make any sense?
To me, it makes complete sense. What do you think, Kelly? And Kelly, I feel your freaking frustration, man. Because yeah, I wanted to literally kill my parents for the longest time.
Mm,
Um, because it just destroyed our life. So it's definitely a net negative. But then that would only come from deprogramming because you can talk to indie Scientologists who will even know that Hubbard was a liar and a bastard, but they have it compartmentalized in their minds where I still believe in the tech and I'm getting something out of this freaking auditing. Not knowing it's self-hypnosis. It's as simple as that. That's why I break down like, what does psychology have to say about this phenomena that's happening in Scientology? Then you realize it's nothing new, and you can go to the source if you want to. Go to Jung, check out Freud if you're into it, or you don't even have to be into these people. I'm not a follower of Freud, but it helps to know where he got the information, because that was the big thing in the 50s and shit. A lot of the things that he pulled from were the new things that were kind of kicking off, and it's just smorgasbord of everything. Bro, I look at the whole thing, Alex, and the only way I could actually get over this seething anger and not want to destroy everybody around me is I had to accept that, I just flipped everything around. Do you want to look at the glasses half empty or half full? So I accept that this has been my life journey and looking at it from a different perspective because it allowed me to take my life into my own hands. I didn't have anybody to help me out of this. Friends didn't understand. My parents and everybody turned their back on me. I'm not feeling sorry for myself here. I'm just telling you what it took for me to not act out and go really bonkers and to pull all that into myself and self introspect. That is the greatest gift I've ever gotten. And I think I wish, how they say, would you like others to have the wins and gains that you now have? I think if everybody was challenged on that level and had to go through hell and back and reassess everything they've ever believed in, we
mm.
would be living in a very, very different world.
That is the exact point I was trying to make here is you are not doing a Scientology thing right now. You're not applying Scientology. You're not however,
Exactly.
it's a side effect. If it wasn't for Scientology, you wouldn't be introspective. You wouldn't
Exactly.
be looking at
Exactly
your
right.
own thoughts and opinions. You
Exactly
wouldn't be
right.
analyzing these things. So Scientology has had a positive impact on you, but not because it was meant to, not because that was the
Exactly
intention. It's a
right.
side effect, right? And that's
Exactly.
exactly the point I'm trying to get across here is that Scientology isn't all bad, but that's the bits where it's good are generally, from what I found anyway, areas where it's unintentionally good.
Yeah, yes. Yes,
right?
man. I'm having a line charge, as they say in Scientology. Alex, I get so many wins and gains. Sorry to use the Scientology terms, friends. We just snap into this shit consciously knowing that we're doing this because it's funny. But I do get case gains and floating needles every time I talk to you on the phone and shit. And we do lives. Like, yes, dude, I'm undoing the charge.
Yeah.
It keeps coming up 15 years later. I don't think it's ever ending. And I get a lot of Alex, just doing YouTube, putting your story out there, all the editing, you have to keep up with the algorithm, all this bullshit that's just like too beyond me that I gave up with a long time ago. That part sucks. But the freaking healing, the community, the fact that there's layers that are still coming off, they'll come infinitely. There's no like end point to all this. It's simply about, Scientology made me accidentally, like your point, into a totally different, better person than I ever would have been if I didn't go into Scientology. You know what I mean by that, right? Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, I would have skirted through life my usual kind of self-righteous, little anger, kind of just whatever. But this experience touched me to my core. So it
Mm.
forced me to fucking fix myself
Yeah.
and really, hold myself to account. That never would have happened minus
This is true.
Scientology.
Helicopter, I think it's all based on experience. I experienced it in an abusive way. So all I've seen is
Sorry,
bad.
Kelly.
Others have experiences which I'm trying to understand. And I think this is the thing really you need to understand, Kelly, is that like everybody in Scientology, whether they know it or not, have been abused and manipulated, right? And
Good
this is the
point.
thing. I was locked in a room and couldn't leave until I'd written up what I'd done wrong against it. Like there were things that would fit the typical description of what abuse is or manipulation, whatever. And yeah, they were traumatic and so on, but not everyone goes through that experience. Most people in Scientology don't have that horrible experience, but they are still being abused and manipulated because they are forced and coerced into a way of thinking, a belief set, a mindset that is not their own, because that is
Right.
the fundamental of what Scientology is in and of itself. Scientology itself, its practices, the way it works, because it is presented as not just a way of thinking or an
The
answer, it is
way.
the answer. And just in itself being presented as the answer, not an answer, is destructive, because then you shut down all other
Yes.
interpretations and beliefs. And
Yep.
so even if someone didn't go through the horrible abusive experience that Kelly did, or the experience I did, or that you did, that doesn't mean they aren't being abused and coerced and manipulated in their own way, right? And
Yep.
this is what I'm trying to say here, is that what you need to start looking at things with your own mindset and dissecting things and coming up with your own opinion, because that's not something you can do in Scientology. And if you just blanket say Scientology is all bad, well, that's just the same as saying it's the answer. You're saying it is the enemy. Well, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to actually look at things in that nuanced gray area and think, okay, what are the good bits? What are the bad bits? What do I agree with? What do I disagree with? In Scientology, there's the principle that man is basically good. All men are trying to do, all humankind is trying to do, is live a better existence. There's nothing wrong with that. I believe in that to this day. That is true. That's a good thing
Mhm.
to live life by, that we're all trying to live a better life. Great. That's positive. There are no negative side effects of that. There is no way that you can have that belief in itself that has a negative impact on anyone. If you live your life believing that most people are trying to do the right thing, that's great. There's nothing bad or harmful or negative about this. But when you start applying it in a 100% absolutist way, then it can start to be seen as harmful. And that's what I'm trying to say here, is that there are bits in Scientology that are good, and actually those bits generally are unintentional or stolen from other practices.
Yeah.
And the way that Scientology is presented as the answer, not an answer, is one of the things that makes it destructive.
I would just add one caveat onto that because we're back to the abusive relationship. So, would you say, if we frame Scientology as an abusive relationship, would you
Mm,
say that being in an abusive relationship was all bad? So, this is why we were talking about earlier, Alex, how it's just my personal opinion, and what I used to get out of this is to swing hardcore the other way. This was an evil motherfucker. L. Ron Hubbard was a liar. He was a manipulator, and he was those 2 to 3 or 5%, however many there are. I think it's actually growing. Psychopaths. So he didn't have a fucking conscience. So I think it's really important to understand that whatever you think about the tech, before you break that down, you were manipulated. This man didn't have a conscience, and he absolutely was evil. So I make no bones about that. And I at least needed to recognize that before. That helped me deal with my anger, to suss that. And then I can swing back in a more calm manner and go, okay, I guess I can look at this. What did I get out of it? What, how did this whole thing work? But I don't want to, when we sit, that's like saying to an abuser, because I asked that psychopath about this too. He says, don't thank your abuser, because I was holding on, using my mom as an example, I was like, when you're in an abusive relationship, you have a tendency to make it your fault and to take everything onto you. And even when you get out of Scientology, if you don't recognize the characteristics of a psychopath, and that Hubbard was one, he was a conscienceless person, to make it simple, then you're likely, like I did, if you're a caring person, to take that on.
Well,
so I think it's important to recognize
it.
It's evil, yes. He's an evil man.
The whole thing is that you're a cause. You pulled it in. What did you do?
Yes,
that's even more intense to Scientology when you come out. Is you're always,
that's what an abuser would say to you too. What did you do? It's never the abuser's fault. So I just wanted to differentiate. Yeah, it is all bad, from the fact that you're not going to get anything positive that you didn't already have within yourself by being an abuser. Here's how I'd frame it, Alex. What being in an abusive relationship with Hubbard and my family did is they automatically triggered things in me that were dormant and that would have remained dormant because of the challenges they gave me. They sprung all sorts of things, and also the heady ideas, all the ideas that Hubbard stole from everywhere else. That was like a smorgasbord of, as he would say, of knowledge that I wouldn't have been introduced to. So from that point of view, I just look at it as a life lesson, as a challenge, not necessarily as a good thing, but I think it could be a good thing to meet evil on the deepest level, confront it, as they would say in Scientology, and come out the other side with the data. That's really, actually, when you get down to it, all I got out of it. But minus Scientology, there's no interest in me studying any of these subjects that we talk about, Alex. Wouldn't be doing any of this crap. And it definitely would have limited my perceptions. I would have walked around like a haughty, kind of arrogant, self-centered person, just like basically the average person. I mean, if you ask the average person, most people, I think, would be pretty confident in their beliefs, what they believe, without inspecting it too much. So this kind of an experience can be healthy, where you're forced to inspect your certainties. That's really the only thing I got out of it about being in an abusive relationship. So it can have benefits. Just depends. That's just my opinion, though, Alex. That's not going to be everybody's situation.
Absolutely. And guys, look, if you want to ask us any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll start going through some of them now as we start to wrap up. And super chats and all of that, Doug and I will split the cost, because Doug isn't monetized, so you can't do super chats on his channel, but anything that goes through on my channel will be split half and half. The last, just so everyone knows, the last one that we did with Catherine Olson, all of the money from the super chats is going to be donated to the Aftermath Foundation.
And
we'll decide what we're going to do each week with it, but generally that's what we do, because YouTube take a 30% cut of all super chats, and we're not doing this for the money anyway. But if you do want to ask us a question, put it in the live chat. There's a really good point here. Jen writes, I really appreciate Doug's comparison to abusive relationships as similar to the good aspects of high control groups. It does address the same question: how could someone fall for it? I think the main thing here is because you don't really, it's the same with an abusive relationship. Like,
love bombing.
No one goes into an abusive relationship. Like, no one.
They don't beat you on day one.
Do you want to come and join my cult because we're going to manipulate and abuse you? No one says, hey, do you want to be my boyfriend or girlfriend? I'm going to manipulate you and abuse you.
Of course they don't.
It's not what happens. They lure you in, and then it ends up having that effect. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I joined Scientology because I thought it was the right thing to do, and they have a way of answering your questions that put your mind at rest. You hear all these horror stories, and they kind of explain it away and go, well, no, there's that's not quite what happened, or that happened because this wasn't done right. Or with Kelly's story as a prime example, if I was in Scientology today and someone asked me about it, I would probably give the answer along the lines of, Well, what Kelly's parents did is squirreling. That's not how Scientology is
I
meant to be
know.
applied. That's not what Scientology is about. And that is the truth, right? Like Kelly's parents did
Well,
apply Scientology in a way that isn't as per policy. However, they did apply Scientology in a way that was harmful. And the fact that it was possible
but
to
you know,
apply
the policies
Scientology in
are,
a harmful way
sorry to
is what
interrupt.
makes it bad.
You do know that the policies are meant to be harmful, though, because that was his intention.
That's
It's just
exactly what I'm
hidden.
saying.
So, if you, I'm just saying they were applying, whether they were applying Scientology correctly or not. Let's say they were applying it correctly, the end result's still going to be the same. And Kelly's
Yeah.
sitting there screaming at her parents, like I'd imagine, why can't you see what's going on?
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly.
that's what they would say. That's what a
That's what I'm saying.
Scientologist would say. They're just not applying Scientology
Yeah,
correctly. Alex, I'd
Scientology
want to
would,
kill people that would
yeah,
say
they
that.
would
Yeah,
say, "Well, look, that's not the way it's meant to be done. It sounds
I
like it wasn't
know.
done correctly."
Oh,
And
I
when
hated
you're being
that.
lured into Scientology, you kind of think, "Oh, okay, you're right. Well, maybe that is the case. I'll give it benefit
Right.
of the doubt." Or, "Okay, well, let me read what okay, when you read the policies and you go, "Oh, yeah, that does sound like it wasn't done properly." And so therefore, and that's how they get you in.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is that whether or not the policies Kelly's dad or mum were doing were right or wrongly interpreted, the fact is Scientology allowed that to happen, right?
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a system that can be used in that way, whether intentionally or not intentionally, right? And that's why it's overall had a negative impact. And I think, I think Kelly should never have gone through gone through that. And I think
Yeah,
it's
all she
horrible.
did was incarnate into this world, and her parents were to dictate her outcome, and she had no say in it. That's what I'm saying. We can't choose
Mm,
our parents, so we have to make the best of our life situations. I mean, I kept going, how could I have, this, that, and the other thing? Once my dad brought the mind virus known as Scientology into the family, I was fucked, and there's nothing you can do about it. So Alex, this is why I didn't have kids. I've said this in an interview recently. I didn't want to fuck my own kids up. I knew I was fucked up. And it's like, as a parent, I mean, I'm sure that there's parents that do it right out there, but how many of them pass their belief system with not even out of malevolence? They're not doing it to be mean. My parents were not trying to harm me, dude. They paid a lot of money for me to do Scientology when I was younger. They paid for the Puritan shit. I didn't have the fucking money as a
mm,
teenager. They were genuinely trying to help their angry child. So that, that's what makes it so frustrating is I never got to find out who my parents, my dad would have been minus this cult
mm,
identity thrown on top of them. And I wasn't able to get them out. And it's a miracle I fucking got out. The whole thing is fucked the fuck up. Because,
yeah.
minus Hubbard, we all would have gotten along just fine, I'm sure. You know what I mean? More or less. It's just,
Melissa, question. After being in Scientology, did you feel it hard to express true feelings?
what do you think, Alex?
I think, yeah. I mean, Scientology um, tells you that you are living, it makes you feel like you're confronting emotions, and the TRs make you present in real time and, being able to confront things. But in reality, what it does is suppress your emotions. And yeah, it does make it really hard to feel emotions. When I started going to therapy for something completely unrelated, the thing that started my process of unpacking and unpicking it all in my brain of Scientology is that I was struggling to feel an emotion in the room because I would be able to recite a traumatic incident or talk about something that happened to me, and just talk about it as if it was just something that happened with no emotion. And the therapist was like, well, you need to feel the emotion here in the room. And I'm like, well, I don't feel anything because it happened, right? And that's it. Like, it's done now. Like, it doesn't. And that's the impact Scientology has on you emotionally, is it suppresses things so much. Not that I recognized I was getting upset and was trying not to feel it. I wasn't even feeling the emotion in the first place. And that's what Scientology does. So it's a long process to try and unwind that.
Definitely. It depersonalizes and desensitizes you so big time. Like, death is no big deal. I'd have people pass and I mean, it's just what you said, Alex. What do you mean I'm not feeling the emotion? I don't have any feeling behind that. It really makes you into a secondary sociopath. I don't know how
Mm.
else to describe it because I was horrified at all the things that I didn't allow myself, not only not allow myself to feel, I just couldn't. I didn't feel it. I was dead. So, it's amazing. Like, I've always been the reason my parents really pushed Scientology on me and not my sister so much, because she was the golden child. I was the one rebelling. That's usually the one that susses there's some kind of secrets and shit in the family and tries to call them out. So I thought it was my fault, but I was always emotional. But they shut that down. And my parents in Scientology thought that's a good thing, because the less emotional Doug is, the less angry he'll be and the less trauma he'll bring into the family and shit. So I've always been emotional, but I didn't know that how emotional I really was until I got out, because it felt really good to cry. It felt really good to allow myself to be angry in a controlled environment in the acting class. It's just, I can't get across how much shutting your emotions down and your critical thinking is a part of Scientology, because without that, the red flags, you would be able to suss them, and you would be able to feel. You need your emotions to feel danger, to feel. I think it can be a part of your intuition. Doesn't mean feelings are always right, but if you shut them down, your compass is gone, and Hubbard's got your mind from there on out.
Yeah.
So that's a big point.
Absolutely. Rose K just said here, Alex, abusers don't always realize they're being abusive. That doesn't make it less abusive. They show up with the best, intentions, and you go in with the best intentions. Exactly, right? I would go out selling books. I was director of public book sales. I was in charge of all of the sales that happened here in London, in Malta. We were the only ideal org. So it was a pretty important job, selling books, getting people into Scientology. And there was a policy, crying is buying, right? If I'm sat in front of someone who I'm doing the stress test, I'm trying to sell them the book, and you have to find out their ruin, what's causing them a problem in their life. If they're sat there in front of me crying, well, they're gonna bloody buy the book, because I found out what's ruining their life, right? And I thought I was doing the right thing. There is a policy in Scientology when to do with selling books that says something along the lines of you have to invade privacy, because if you don't invade privacy, you're not going to figure out what is ruining that person's life, and therefore you're not going to be able to help them, right? So I thought I was doing the right thing. All Scientologists are. That doesn't mean I wasn't manipulating and abusing the person sat in front of me. What a horrible thing to do, right? To get someone to be crying and get them to feel upset and recount trauma or bad experiences they've had in their life to this complete stranger on the street, right? That's not a nice thing to do to somebody. But it was done because I thought I was therefore going to be able to help them, right? By giving them Dianetics, by getting them to buy the book. You think you're doing the right thing. That doesn't mean it's not abusive or manipulative. That is the frame of mind you need to realize as Scientologists. Everyone in Scientology is being abused and is abusing and manipulated and manipulating, but they don't even realize it. I didn't realize it until I'd been out for almost 6 years,
I was just going to say, you gave a perfect example just there of how we are made into abusers, because what you described there is knocking down someone's boundaries. You have to have boundaries. Dude, my boundaries were so invaded by my parents, so I was wide open for Scientology anyways. I would just tell all. I didn't feel like I could hide anything. It's like, I got to be honest. But yeah, that's a tactic of that a narcissist would do, is to remove your boundaries so that you'll then lean on them. But if we didn't know that, the excuse that we were used, well, it's their reactive mind. We have to apply more pressure than their reactive mind is going to spit back to us. So it's okay to invade their boundaries, to smash their boundaries. That's a subtle reframe of how we're made into abusers without knowing we're abusers and thinking we're doing the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. It's very, very interesting how that works, bro. Isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, Scientology changed us. We got something out of it, but we have to acknowledge that. But we also don't need to let it define us, right? It's okay to be an ex-Scientologist. We always will be ex-Scientologists. That doesn't mean it has to define us going forwards in life, right?
Exactly.
It's an important thing that happened in our history, but it doesn't have to define who we are as people.
Good point. I agree.
Me Time DIY with Erica, thank you for the super chat. This has really opened my eyes and heart at the recovery process. Thank you both for sharing such a difficult time in your lives.
Thanks, Erica.
Exactly. I think that's the thing, is sharing experiences and people's stories is what helps people recover. Lorna here, I was in Scientology 40 years ago and it's still there. We aren't duplicating. Skip it for now. I mean, look, that's exactly it. It doesn't matter how long you were in or out of Scientology. It's the impact goes deep, and
Yes.
it's not like I don't believe there's a process where you need to do X, Y, and Z and then you'll no longer be affected by it. Like, it's a process. It takes time, right?
Exactly. Good point. Exactly.
Rocking out with Kim D High. How many of USPs
Great
feel
question.
like you aren't fit for the
That's
regular world?
such a great question. Go
Doug,
ahead,
do you want to go
Alex.
ahead? No, you go ahead.
Okay, well, I never fit in this world, I realize now. So this was always going to be my path. That's another thing, Alex, when, I can only say this. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm going to be 50 in July. I've been through, it's almost like living either multiple lifetimes or two separate lifetimes, because the way I see the world post Scientology and the recovery process, which is ongoing, but I spent a long time and kind of hit a milestone, versus most of my life, which is spent as a Scientologist, getting more and more hardcore. It's literally like two different people. So can you throw that question back up, my man? Or I hope you didn't lose it, because I wanted to
Not that one.
hopefully get hurt. Sorry about that. I just wanted to actually see, so I don't go off on a tangent.
It's okay. I'll find it again.
God damn it, Alex. Sorry, man, to make you pull this up, but I need to see it again because I had a point. Stand by, please.
Stand by. Here.
Okay. So no, I never fit into the real world anyways. And again, Scientology made me feel more special, like I was getting out of that regular world anyways. But especially coming out, being an ex-Scientologist, being a cult member or an ex-cult member, that I'm sure anybody that's been in a cult will know that, yeah, you always feel like a fish out of water. I feel like an alien to this world even more so than I originally did, because of the inability. It's a special experience. It really is. It's just like being in an abusive relationship. So how many gals or guys out there have been in it? Because it's not just girls. How many guys and have tried to explain to their mates about what's going on, and their mate just says, this person's evil. Can't you fucking see it and get over it? Get over it. Why do you keep talking about it? You left your husband, he was years ago. Can't you just get over it? Why is it fucking your life up so much? So no, I think it permanently changes you and makes you a fish out of water in the regular world. But I was already like that anyway. So it's Alex, I feel like a total alien to this world. And when I look at especially what's going on the world stage in the last few years, I have just been like eating popcorn, watching it from, as they would say in Scientology, an exterior viewpoint, because it looks like madness to me.
Yeah, it's true. Jen writes here, I want to rewind and rehear what you just said maybe a few hundred times, but also I think for at least myself, that looking at both good and the bad makes it hard to trust myself. I think that is such an important thing with Scientology, and it is hard to trust yourself, because you went from being fairly critically minded anyway, or however you were before Scientology. Even if you're grown up in Scientology, you get to a point where you fully believe in this and you're fully indoctrinated and your mindset is fully on board with the program. And so when you come out, there are so many questions of like, hold on, if I believed Scientology was the answer to everything, well, how do I know that the sky is really blue and the grass is really green? Is that something I've just been telling myself? How do I know what is fact from fiction, what is real and what isn't real? And you have to go through that process of figuring out what is true for you. Because even though in Scientology they teach you what's true for you is true, right? You have to apply it. You do it, you see it for yourself, and therefore it's true. Even though they make you think that's what you're doing, actually you're not, because when you don't see it work, it's because you've not understood something properly, or it's because you've done something wrong against the church. So they make you think that's what you're doing, but you're not. And so when you come out, you have to actually do that process of, okay, what do I believe in? And it is really hard to trust not just yourself, but to trust other people as well.
Yeah. I still have issues with that today, and it can be really terrifying too. I had to question that was my belief system. So it was really frightening, actually, to have to take that responsibility upon myself when I was in no position. I was so codependent on my cult leader and my family that to actually have to think for myself was really freaking terrifying.
Absolutely. 100%. All right. Well, Doug, any final parting comments before we start to wrap this up here?
I just wanted to say thanks, Alex. I've been looking forward to this, man, the last couple of weeks, and I think this was an excellent talk, man. I just really appreciate you not having me on, but coming up with the topic and just chatting it out like this.
Absolutely. I think the real question here that it's all been leading up to, that we all really want to know the answer to,
You're going to say
the real
something
question
that's going to
here
bust
is,
my balls.
when will you actually admit that you are actually in love with me?
Here we
That's
go.
what we all want to know.
He almost got to the end, an hour and a half. You couldn't just let it go, and you had to throw that out. We are back to nomance, sir.
When will you admit it, Doug?
Nomance.
When are you going to accept?
What do you want me to say? I'll write it all down, Alex. I'll write it all down. I'll get off my overts and both those. Just tell me what to say, and I'll say it.
Well, look, guys, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already, go and subscribe to Doug's channel, Dazed But Not Confused. If you're watching
and
his
Alex,
channel,
Apostate Alex.
Check out mine, Apostate Alex. Yes, if you like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that helps push the video out to more people. We will be continuing this next week, Thursdays at 2. So this is a weekly segment, so do come and check us out.
We might have a guest. We might, well, we won't say, but
TBC.
Okay.
Yes,
there you go.
Absolutely. And also, just for those of you on my channel who may not be aware, I've just been announced as a co-host for the That's So Fucked Up podcast, which is bloody hilarious. We recorded the first 2 episodes. That's coming out next Wednesday. Awesome. So go and watch the trailer to that on my channel if you haven't already. It's actually quite funny. Alex. We're going to start dissecting Scientology and looking at things with more of a comedic value. You know, it's important to find the funny parts of Scientology, looking out of it, because it can get quite deep and quite intense, can't it? And it's important to lose sight of the comedic stuff. So
I'm looking forward to that, man.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week. This has been Thursdays at 2 with Doug and Alex.
Fuck yeah.